In the forgotten alleyways of a marginalized neighborhood, where the thick air carried the persistent scent of dampness and the distant echo of a life struggling to exist, little Mariana inhabited a world of shadows. Within a modest house, its sole illumination provided by a dangling light bulb that flickered with the uncertainty of its own glow, the 6-year-old girl lived in a state of orphanhood and helplessness, a condition woven into the very fabric of poverty that clung to every corner like stubborn mold, suffocating any glimpse of comfort or security. Mariana, fragile as a newborn bird, felt her stomach clench with chronic hunger, a familiar ache defining her days and sleepless nights. Despite immediate vulnerability to the biting cold, the constant threat of illness, and the abandonment that enveloped her like a heavy cloak, an unbreakable spark of hope radiated from her large, frightened eyes. Her explicit and deepest desire was not for toys or fairy tales, but for a simple plate of warm food and a safe place where she could finally rest, far from the incessant fear and cruelty that seemed to lurk in every shadow. Lorena, Mariana's stepmother, personified the antithesis of any human warmth, an haughty and resentful woman whose relationship with the girl was tinged with pure disdain. In public, Lorena maintained a social mask of kindness, skillfully constructed with forced smiles and sweet words, a facade that easily deceived unsuspecting neighbors. Her presence radiated a calculated coldness, a veneer of respectability that crumbled in the intimacy of their home, revealing the storm of cruelty residing there, ready to explode without warning. The most striking visual gesture from Lorena was her nails, always impeccably painted a deep dark red, which, in moments of rage, seemed to transform into sharp claws as they grabbed or pushed the fragile child. This stark contrast between her public persona and private brutality painted a chilling portrait, a warning to anyone who dared to look beyond the superficial. Lorena's practical motivation for keeping Mariana close was the girl's orphan's pension, a steady stream of money she flagrantly embezzled for her own luxuries and whims, further fueling her resentment at having to endure the presence of the child, whom she saw as an inconvenient burden and an unwanted reminder. Under Lorena's vigilant and cruel gaze, Mariana's life was a succession of privations and humiliations. Each day brought the uncertainty of a meal, the pain of a disguised tug, or the silent terror of a veiled threat. The girl had learned to move without making noise, to speak in whispers, and to hide in the darkest corners of the house, where shadows offered false solace. Fear was her constant companion, and hope, a tenuous thread clinging to the possibility of a different tomorrow, one where pain and hunger might, perhaps, finally disappear. On a chilling afternoon, the cold invaded the modest house like an unwelcome presence, and Mariana's stomach rumbled in a silent lament only she could hear. Her hungry eyes scoured the almost empty kitchen table until an unexpected glimpse captured her attention. A forgotten piece of moldy bread, but for her, a promise of relief. With her heart pounding with desperate hope, the girl extended her trembling hand, unaware that her innocent search for sustenance was about to unleash a storm of unimaginable fury, a point of no return in her small, suffering existence. The air in the kitchen seemed to freeze as a shadow fell over her, signaling an abrupt end to her fleeting moment of hope, replacing it with a familiar dread that tightened its grip around her fragile spirit, a palpable tension. Lorena, with her hawk-like eyes, had caught Mariana in her act of desperation, and the sight of the girl attempting to snatch a crumb from her domain ignited a disproportionate rage. Lorena's public mask of kindness instantly collapsed, revealing the cold cruelty that truly resided in her heart, and Mariana's brief instant of hope was brutally crushed under the weight of uncontrollable anger, transforming the silence into a chilling premonition of pain. A brutal shove, laden with all the contempt Lorena felt, hurled Mariana out of the house. The tiny figure flew through the cold air, falling violently onto the wet asphalt of the alley, where torrential rain already transformed the ground into a dark, icy mirror. A muffled whimper escaped the girl's lips, mixing with the sound of the rain lashing the ground, and a sharp pain pierced her leg. The impact was not merely physical. It was a devastating blow to her already fragile belief in any kind of safety or human warmth that might exist in her world, shattering it completely. The deep cut on Mariana's knee began to bleed, staining the rainwater a dark red, a vivid reminder of the violence suffered. Few neighbors, peeking through fogged windows with heavy hearts, lowered their gaze, silent accomplices in a collective omission. Their fleeting glances were a testament to the indifference that often accompanies domestic cruelty, a silence weighing more than any scream, isolating Mariana further in her pain. Trembling from cold and agony, her face wet with tears and rain, Mariana tried to rise, but the excruciating pain in her knee held her down. She felt utterly alone, a tiny point of despair in the vast rainy night. This crushing solitude, this pervasive sense of being unseen, is a reality for so many. Where are you watching from as these silent battles unfold? The rain continued to fall, washing the asphalt and the blood, yet never the pain from her heart. Amidst the darkness and despair, a tall, determined silhouette began to materialize at the end of the street, advancing with firm steps, a presence Mariana did not recognize, but one that carried the promise of an imminent, profound change. The brutal shove had sent Mariana hurtling through the frigid air, a tiny, fragile projectile against the indifference of the night. Her small body, barely 6 years old, landed with a sickening thud on the slick, wet asphalt of the alleyway, the impact reverberating through her bones. A sharp, searing pain instantly pierced her left knee, a sudden, agonizing jolt that stole her breath and replaced it with a choked whimper. The torrential rain, an icy deluge, lashed down upon her, instantly soaking her thin clothes and plastering her fine, dark hair to her face. The metallic tang of fear filled her mouth as the heavy wooden door of the house, her only shelter, slammed shut behind her with a resounding crash, a final, definitive pronouncement of her abandonment. She lay there, a crumpled heap, feeling the cold, rough texture of the ground against her cheek, the relentless drumming of the raindrops mocking her silent plea for warmth and safety, utterly alone. The deep, ragged cut on Mariana's knee began to bleed, a stark, crimson bloom spreading rapidly into the muddy puddles forming around her, painting the dark rainwater a horrifying shade of red. Each pulse of her tiny heart sent a fresh wave of agony through the wound, a vivid, undeniable testament to the violence she had just endured. Her thin frame trembled uncontrollably, not just from the biting cold that seeped into her very marrow, but from the profound shock and terror that had seized her small spirit. The alley, usually a place of quiet shadows, now felt like an open wound itself, mirroring the raw pain in her leg. Her tears, hot and desperate, mingled with the cold rain streaming down her face, blurring the already dim world around her. She was a small, lost bird, grounded by a broken wing, yearning for a nest that had just cast her out into the storm. Through the blurred veil of rain and tears, Mariana could vaguely discern the faint glow from the windows of nearby houses, some of them briefly illuminated by fleeting shadows. A curtain twitched in one, then another, as a few neighbors, their faces indistinct behind the fogged glass, peered out into the downpour. Their heavy hearts, however, translated only into lowered gazes and swift retreats from the pain, silent accomplices in a collective omission that pressed down on Mariana like a physical weight. Their fleeting glances were a testament to the chilling indifference that so often accompanies domestic cruelty, a silence that weighed more heavily than any scream, isolating Mariana further in her raw, unadulterated pain. The world, it seemed, had decided to look away, leaving her to face the storm alone, a tiny figure swallowed by the vast, uncaring night, her suffering an inconvenient truth. Trembling from the relentless cold and the agonizing pain, her small face streaked with a mixture of tears and rain, Mariana made a desperate attempt to rise. Her fingers, numb with chill, clawed at the wet asphalt, seeking purchase, but the excruciating throb in her knee held her captive, a cruel tether to the unforgiving ground. Each strained movement sent a fresh wave of nausea through her, a dizzying reminder of her helplessness. The distant, muted sounds of the neighborhood, usually a comforting backdrop, now seemed to mock her solitude, emphasizing how utterly alone she was, a tiny point of despair in the vast, indifferent, rainy night. This crushing solitude, this pervasive sense of being unseen and unheard, is a reality for so many. Where are you watching from, as these silent battles unfold, hidden in plain sight, yearning for someone to truly see? The cold, damp air invaded her lungs with each shallow breath, chilling her from the inside out, and she felt the raw edges of the cut on her knee burning, a constant fiery reminder of Lorena's venomous rage. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably, a rapid, frantic rhythm against the drum of the rain, as a desperate shiver racked her entire body. The smell of wet earth and stale garbage, usually ignored, now filled her senses, intensifying her misery and making the alley feel even more desolate and unwelcoming. She longed for the faint, flickering warmth of the single light bulb in her modest house, a beacon of sorts, however dim, but that warmth and any semblance of safety had been violently snatched away, leaving her exposed and vulnerable to the elements, and to a fear that was slowly consuming her. The rain continued its merciless descent, washing the grimy asphalt and the spreading crimson stain, yet never the pain from her heart, which felt heavy and bruised. Just as a profound, chilling despair threatened to fully engulf Mariana, pulling her into an abyss of utter hopelessness, a subtle shift occurred at the far end of the rain-swept street. Amidst the swirling darkness and the relentless downpour, a tall, determined silhouette began to materialize, slowly but steadily advancing with firm, resolute steps through the puddles and the gloom. Mariana, her vision blurred by tears and the rain, could not yet discern the features of this approaching presence, but an unbidden, primal instinct whispered of an imminent, profound change, a shadow of an unknown future drawing closer with each purposeful stride. Before the biting cold became her constant companion, and before the shadows swallowed her world whole, Mariana remembered a different kind of warmth. She clutched a worn, mustard-yellow teddy bear, its once fluffy fur now matted and thin, a silent testament to a love that had abruptly vanished. It was a gift from her father, a man whose laughter still echoed faintly in the deepest corners of her memory, a sound as comforting as the lullabies her mother used to sing, fragrant with the scent of jasmine and warm bread. Their tiny, sun-drenched cottage, a stark contrast to the damp, oppressive air of her current existence, had been a haven of safety and abundant affection. Then, a crushing silence descended, an accident, a void that swallowed her parents whole, leaving only the teddy bear as a tangible link to a past now shimmering like a distant, unreachable dream. The bear, named Sunny, was her only friend, her only protector, a fragile anchor in a sea of overwhelming grief and confusion that had washed her ashore into a life she barely recognized, a profound loneliness. The transition to Lorena's modest house, nestled in the same forgotten alleyways, was not a migration, but a stark descent into a colder reality. The house, with its single flickering light bulb, felt less like a home and more like a temporary holding cell, its walls imbued with an unspoken tension. Mariana, a tiny figure dwarfed by the unfamiliar silence, had initially harbored a child's naive hope that this new place might offer some semblance of the comfort she had lost, a fleeting fantasy quickly dispelled by Lorena's icy demeanor. Her small hands, still accustomed to gentle caresses, now learned to navigate a world where every touch was a potential threat, every glance a judgment. The chronic hunger, a gnawing emptiness in her stomach, became her most intimate companion, a constant, dull ache that overshadowed any memory of the nourishing meals her mother had so lovingly prepared, further emphasizing her profound vulnerability. Lorena, with her meticulously styled hair and an unsettlingly bright smile, was a master illusionist in the dim theater of their neighborhood. In public, her voice would soften to a syrupy sweetness, her words laced with feigned concern for Mariana, carefully crafted to deceive the few watchful eyes that dared to linger. Neighbors, with their own burdens and their tendency to believe what they wished, were easily swayed by her performance, seeing only a kind stepmother burdened by a difficult child. Yet, Mariana, with the acute perception of a survivor, could always detect the calculated coldness lurking beneath the polished veneer, a subtle shift in Lorena's gaze, a tightening of the jaw that belied the saccharine words. It was in these fleeting moments that the glint of Lorena's perfectly painted dark red nails, a stark and menacing splash of color, seemed to shimmer with a silent, predatory warning. Behind the flimsy, warped door of their home, Lorena's mask would swiftly crumble, revealing the tempest of cruelty that truly resided within her. The house, perpetually shrouded in shadows, became a stage for Mariana's silent suffering. The air, thick with the scent of dampness and neglect, seemed to press down on the child, amplifying her fear. Lorena's cruelty was not always overt. It was often in the silent contempt, the deliberate withholding of food, the sharp tugs disguised as corrections, or the veiled threats whispered in the suffocating quiet. Mariana learned to read the subtle shifts in light from the flickering bulb, signaling Lorena's approach, learned to make herself small, disappearing into the darkest corners where even the shadows offered a fleeting, false comfort, a desperate respite from the storm. In these hidden recesses, Mariana would often clutch Sunny, her mustard-yellow teddy bear, its familiar worn texture a small comfort against the vastness of her despair. She would whisper secrets to him, dreams of a warm plate of rice and beans, a soft bed, and a day without the gnawing ache of hunger. Though her body was frail and her spirit bruised, a tenacious spark of hope, a tiny ember, still flickered within her, fueled by the memory of her parents, love, and the silent promise she made to Sunny that one day they would be safe. This quiet resilience, this ability to find solace in a tattered toy and a whispered wish, was her secret strength, a fragile shield against the relentless barrage of Lorena's disdain and the overwhelming bleakness of her daily existence. Just as the rain outside intensified, lashing against the thin window panes, Mariana overheard Lorena's voice, sharp and venomous, from the next room. The words were indistinct, but the tone was unmistakable, a cold, calculating edge that sent a fresh wave of terror through the child. She pressed herself tighter against the cold, damp wall. Sunny clutched to her chest, her small heart pounding like a trapped bird. The silhouette that had been approaching at the end of the street, a presence Mariana still couldn't identify, seemed to momentarily freeze in her mind's eye as Lorena's voice rose, hinting at a plan, a final solution to the burden of Mariana's existence. The world outside, and the one within the house, seemed to conspire, tightening its grip, leaving Mariana utterly convinced that there was truly no way out, no escape from this suffocating nightmare. Mariana's small hand, trembling with desperate hope, was inches from the forgotten piece of moldy bread on the kitchen table, a silent plea for sustenance in a world that offered so little. Suddenly, a cold, oppressive shadow enveloped her, chilling the very air in the modest kitchen, as Lorena's hawk-like eyes, piercing and full of disdain, fixated on the child's innocent transgression. The sight of Mariana attempting to snatch a crumb from her domain ignited a disproportionate, volcanic rage within Lorena, instantly shattering her carefully constructed public mask of kindness. The forced smiles and sweet words vanished, revealing the raw, frigid cruelty that truly resided in her heart. Mariana's brief, fragile instant of hope was brutally crushed under the overwhelming weight of this uncontrollable anger, transforming the suffocating silence of the house into a chilling premonition of imminent pain, a moment when her fragile world tilted violently. A brutal shove, laden with all the contempt Lorena harbored for the child, propelled Mariana violently backward, a tiny, fragile figure launched into the frigid air. She flew through the cold, damp space of the kitchen, her small body barely 6 years old, landing with a sickening thud onto the slick, wet asphalt of the alleyway. The impact reverberated through her bones, a sudden, agonizing jolt that stole her breath and replaced it with a choked whimper. The torrential rain, an icy deluge, lashed down upon her, instantly soaking her thin clothes and plastering her fine, dark hair to her face, mingling with the metallic tang of fear that filled her mouth. A sharp, searing pain instantly pierced her left knee, a devastating blow not merely physical, but to her already fragile belief in any kind of safety or human warmth that might exist in her world, shattering it completely. The immediate physical consequence of the fall was a deep, ragged cut on Mariana's small knee, which began to bleed profusely, a stark, crimson bloom spreading rapidly into the muddy puddles forming around her. The dark rainwater was painted a horrifying shade of red, a vivid, undeniable testament to the violence she had just endured. Her thin frame trembled uncontrollably, not just from the biting cold that seeped into her very marrow, but from the profound shock and terror that had seized her small spirit, making her feel utterly exposed. Through the blurred veil of rain and tears, Mariana could vaguely discern the faint glow from the windows of nearby houses, some briefly illuminated by fleeting shadows. A curtain twitched, then retreated, as a few neighbors, their faces indistinct behind the fogged glass, peered out into the downpour. Their heavy hearts, however, translated only into lowered gazes and swift retreats from the pain, silent accomplices, in a collective omission that pressed down on Mariana like a physical weight. Their fleeting glances were a testament to the chilling indifference that so often accompanies domestic cruelty, a silence that weighed more heavily than any scream, isolating Mariana further in her raw, unadulterated pain. The world, it seemed, had decided to look away, leaving her to face the storm alone, a tiny figure swallowed by the vast, uncaring night, her suffering an inconvenient truth. Trembling from the relentless cold and the agonizing pain, her small face streaked with a mixture of tears and rain, Mariana made a desperate attempt to rise. Her fingers, numb with chill, clawed at the wet asphalt, seeking purchase, but the excruciating throb in her knee held her captive, a cruel tether to the unforgiving ground. Each strained movement sent a fresh wave of nausea through her, a dizzying reminder of her helplessness. The distant, muted sounds of the neighborhood, usually a comforting backdrop, now seemed to mock her solitude, emphasizing how utterly alone she was, a tiny point of despair in the vast, indifferent, rainy night. This crushing solitude, this pervasive sense of being unseen and unheard, is a reality for so many. Where are you watching from, as these silent battles unfold, hidden in plain sight, yearning for someone to truly see? The heavy wooden door of the house, her only shelter, had slammed shut behind her with a resounding crash, a final, definitive pronouncement of her abandonment, sealing her fate to the elements. The cold, damp air invaded her lungs with each shallow breath, chilling her from the inside out, and she felt the raw edges of the cut on her knee burning, a constant, fiery reminder of Lorena's venomous rage. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably, a rapid, frantic rhythm against the drum of the rain as a desperate shiver racked her entire body. The smell of wet earth and stale garbage, usually ignored, now filled her senses, intensifying her misery and making the alley feel even more desolate and unwelcoming. She longed for the faint, flickering warmth of the single light bulb in her modest house, a beacon of sorts, however dim, but that warmth, and any semblance of safety, had been violently snatched away, leaving her exposed and vulnerable to the elements, and to a fear that was slowly consuming her. The rain continued its merciless descent, washing the grimy asphalt and the spreading crimson stain, yet never the pain from her heart, which felt heavy and bruised. just as a profound, chilling despair threatened to fully engulf Mariana, pulling her into an abyss of utter hopelessness. A subtle shift occurred at the far end of the rain-swept street. Amidst the swirling darkness and the relentless downpour, a tall, determined silhouette began to materialize, slowly but steadily advancing with firm, resolute steps through the puddles and the gloom. Mariana, her vision blurred by tears and the rain, could not yet discern the features of this approaching presence, but an unbidden, primal instinct whispered of an imminent, profound change, a shadow of an unknown future drawing closer with each purposeful stride. The tall, determined silhouette, now closer, began to take on definite form through the curtain of rain, revealing Doña Elena, Mariana's paternal grandmother. Her features, usually etched with a stoic resolve that masked years of profound grief, hardened further as her eyes, which had witnessed an ocean of pain, locked onto the small, trembling figure of her granddaughter. A wave of ice-cold shock, quickly followed by a searing, ancient fury, coursed through her veins, chilling her to the bone even more than the relentless downpour. The sight of Mariana, bloody, abandoned, and shivering uncontrollably on the unforgiving asphalt, reignited a dormant flame deep within her chest, a potent, protective force she had believed extinguished by the tragic loss that had consumed her son and daughter-in-law years ago. The external coldness she wore like a shield, a fortress built against the world's harshness, began to fracture, revealing an internal wound that now pulsed with a fierce, unwavering indignation, demanding justice. Doña Elena had carried the crushing weight of her son's and daughter-in-law's tragic accident for years, a silent burden that had carved deep lines into her soul, leaving her with an incessant, gnawing guilt for not having been closer, for failing to protect her beloved family from an unforeseen fate. Her face, often an inexpressive mask to the outside world, was a testament to the profound, unspoken grief she harbored, a sanctuary for her sorrow. But in this precise, agonizing moment, the blatant injustice unfolding before her, the undeniable cruelty inflicted upon Mariana, was the spark that ignited her wounded heart. The silent pain that had defined her existence abruptly transformed into a burning, unyielding rage, a fierce, protective love that had lain dormant for far too long, now awakening with an overwhelming volcanic intensity, ready to move mountains and shatter the indifference that surrounded them. With a tenderness sharply contrasting her stern jaw and resolute eyes, Doña Elena knelt slowly on the wet asphalt, ignoring the cold seeping into her bones. Her strong, calloused hands reached out, gently yet firmly, gathering Mariana into her arms, pulling the small, fragile body against her chest. She carefully wrapped her granddaughter in a thick wool coat she had been carrying, its warmth a sudden, unexpected balm against the biting chill of the night. The familiar scent of lavender from Elena's clothes and the firm, unwavering embrace were an immediate solace for the child, who instinctively burrowed against her grandmother's chest, her small body racked with sobs, but now with a profound sense of relief. That simple contact, the first genuine affection Mariana had experienced in what felt like an eternity, began to mend the invisible wounds of her soul, a powerful reminder that not all the world was indifference and cruelty, but that love indeed still existed. With Mariana still trembling in her arms, her head tucked securely against her shoulder, Doña Elena rose to her full height, her gaze, now alight with an unyielding fire, fixed directly on Lorena, who stood frozen in the doorway of the house. Elena's voice, deep and resonant, cut through the relentless drumming of the rain, carrying an authority Lorena clearly had not anticipated, shattering the facade of calm the stepmother had painstakingly constructed. "No one," Elena declared, her words clipped and precise, "will ever harm my little one again. From this very moment, Mariana, you are coming with me." The declaration was not merely a statement. It was a solemn vow, an unbreakable oath that echoed in the cold, wet air, marking the undeniable beginning of a fierce battle. This fight was not just for custody, but for the fundamental dignity and the shattered future of a defenseless child, a direct and powerful challenge to Lorena's tyranny. Lorena, caught completely off guard by the sheer vehemence and unwavering determination emanating from Doña Elena, instinctively recoiled, her carefully maintained public mask of kindness momentarily slipping. She attempted to regain her composure, a forced smile twitching at her lips, but the raw, unadulterated fury in Elena's eyes was overwhelming, a force that stripped away all pretense. Lorena tried to avert her gaze, to escape the piercing intensity of the grandmother's stare, but Elena's firm, unwavering eyes held her captive, relentlessly stripping bare the cold cruelty that festered within her. The brief, tense exchange of words on the rain-slicked doorstep was not merely a confrontation. It was an unequivocal declaration of war, where the formidable strength of justice and protective love stood in stark, defiant opposition to the petty selfishness and calculating malevolence that Lorena embodied, shaking her carefully built world. Lorena, rallying her fractured composure, managed to conjure a scornful, dismissive laugh, attempting to brush off Doña Elena's formidable threat as the ravings of a delusional old woman. She sneered, her voice dripping with disdain, confident in her long-honed ability to manipulate appearances and rely on the ingrained inaction of her neighbors, who had always looked away. The stepmother, in her arrogance, tragically underestimated the profound strength and relentless determination of the grandmother. She could not possibly fathom that Elena's deep-seated pain and guilt had transformed into an implacable engine of justice, nor that the grandmother was already, in that very moment, silently beginning to gather the irrefutable evidence and crucial testimonies needed to systematically dismantle Lorena's insidious network of lies and cruelty, each detail a precisely placed nail in the coffin of her false benevolence. The true battle had just begun, a storm brewing that Lorena was utterly unprepared for. Lorena, despite her outward sneer, felt a prickle of unease at Doña Elena's unwavering resolve, a sensation she quickly suppressed, replacing it with a cold, calculating determination. She knew the power of appearances in their forgotten corner of the world, where gossip festered like a wound and public perception was currency. The next morning, a subtle shift in her demeanor began, a meticulously crafted performance for the watchful, if often indifferent, eyes of the neighborhood. She would be seen leaving the house with a sad, wistful expression, her dark red nails delicately touching her temple as if burdened by an unseen sorrow, murmuring vague, sorrowful laments about Elena's unfounded accusations, and the poor, confused child, who was clearly being manipulated. Her voice, usually sharp, became a soft, mournful whisper, designed to elicit sympathy, painting Elena as an unstable old woman driven by bitterness, expertly turning the narrative against the grandmother with a veiled threat of legal action for slander, a subtle poison in the well of public opinion. True to her manipulative nature, Lorena wasted no time in enlisting the services of a local, notoriously unscrupulous lawyer, a man whose reputation for bending truth to his will was as dark and pervasive as the alley's shadows. His office, a cramped space smelling of old paper and stale coffee, became her new stage. With a complacent smile that never quite reached his cold eyes, he began to construct a formidable defense, fabricating documents that painted Lorena as a loving, if overwhelmed, guardian, and Elena as an estranged, vengeful relative seeking to exploit Mariana's orphan's pension. He spoke of legal technicalities, of the burden of proof, and of the community's reluctance to interfere in, quote, family matters, weaving a complex web of bureaucratic obstacles designed to ensnare Elena, making her feel small and insignificant against the monolithic indifference of the legal system, a daunting challenge to her nascent fight for justice. Undeterred by the lawyer's intimidating tactics, Doña Elena moved with the quiet tenacity of a seasoned warrior. Her first stop was the small, cluttered general store run by Maria, a woman whose kind eyes had often offered Mariana a hidden piece of candy. Maria, initially hesitant, her gaze darting towards the street with fear of Lorena's retribution, eventually confessed to witnessing the brutal shove, her voice a hushed tremor. Next, Elena sought out Dr. Rodriguez, a compassionate, aging physician who had occasionally examined Mariana. His medical records, though sparse, clearly documented the child's persistent malnourishment, the recurring bruises, and the untreated leg injury from the fall, stark physical evidence that spoke volumes beyond any words. These quiet confessions, these shared truths, were fragile seeds of hope in a barren landscape, providing Elena with the first tangible allies in her solitary battle against a deeply entrenched injustice. It was during a quiet evening, while gently tending to Mariana's still healing knee, that Doña Elena discovered a small, worn notebook tucked beneath the girl's pillow. Its pages, fragile and slightly damp, were filled with Mariana's hesitant, childlike scrawl and crude, yet profoundly evocative, drawings. There were stick figures with sad, downturned mouths, images of empty plates, and chilling depictions of red claws reaching out in the darkness. One page, stained with what looked like dried tears, simply read, "Sonny is my only friend, hungry." This small, secret diary, a testament to Mariana's silent suffering, became an undeniable, raw piece of evidence, transforming Elena's righteous anger into a cold, focused resolve. It was not merely a child's scribbles. It was a heart-wrenching chronicle of abuse, a voice from the shadows demanding to be heard, a direct pipeline to Mariana's deepest fears. Clutching the diary, her heart heavy with a renewed sense of purpose, Doña Elena knelt beside Mariana's makeshift bed. She stroked the girl's hair, her touch a gentle balm against the lingering fear in Mariana's eyes. "My little one," Elena whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "I promise you, with every fiber of my being, that no one will ever hurt you again. No more hungry nights, no more cold. You are safe now, truly safe, and I will fight for you until my last breath, until every single wrong has been made right." Mariana, her small hand reaching out to grasp Elena's, met her grandmother's gaze, and for the first time, a flicker of something akin to trust, a fragile, nascent hope, softened the persistent fear in her large, expressive eyes. This was not merely a promise, it was a sacred vow, sealed in the quiet intimacy of their shared vulnerability, a bond unbreakable. As Doña Elena began to formally present her growing body of evidence, including the doctor's report, Maria's testimony, and Mariana's heartbreaking diary, the legal proceedings took a sharper, more aggressive turn. Lorena's lawyer, a master of deflection, launched a counter-motion, accusing Elena of child abduction and emotional distress, citing the grandmother's unstable mental state and unfounded allegations as a danger to Mariana's already fragile psyche. The court, swayed by the lawyer's polished rhetoric and the inherent complexities of family law, issued a temporary restraining order against Elena, prohibiting her from having contact with Mariana until further review, a devastating blow that threatened to rip the child from her newfound safety. The world seemed to hold its breath, as the very system meant to protect children now threatened to deliver Mariana back into the hands of her tormentor, leaving Elena reeling in disbelief and despair. Mariana, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, knew the gentle embrace of warmth, a sensation that slowly thawed the ice gripping her small heart. In Doña Elena's humble, yet meticulously clean, two-room apartment, the air was thick with the comforting aroma of simmering vegetable broth, a stark contrast to the persistent dampness of her previous existence. Wrapped snugly in a soft, knitted blanket, a vibrant patchwork of blues and greens, Mariana sat at a small wooden table, her small fingers tentatively clutching a spoon. The steam rising from the bowl of hot, nourishing soup fogged her vision, but the taste, rich and savory, was a revelation, chasing away the familiar gnawing ache of hunger. Each spoonful was a whispered promise of security, a tangible manifestation of the safety she had only ever dreamed of, a fragile, exquisite moment where the crushing weight of fear momentarily lifted, replaced by a quiet, burgeoning sense of peace she hadn't known was possible, feeling the soft texture of the blanket against her cheek. Despite the newfound comfort, The shadows of Mariana's past still clung to her, manifesting in a nervous twitch of her small shoulder or a quick, darting glance towards the door at any sudden sound. Yet, Doña Elena's unwavering patience and gentle ministrations slowly began to chip away at the formidable wall of fear Mariana had built around herself. Elena's hands, though calloused from years of hard work, were surprisingly soft as they stroked Mariana's hair or guided her small fingers to hold the warm mug of chamomile tea. The grandmother spoke in soothing tones, her voice a balm against the child's bruised spirit, telling stories of brave little birds and blooming flowers. Mariana, still clutching her worn Sunny teddy bear, began to lean into Elena's touch, a hesitant but profound gesture of nascent trust, a fragile tendril of hope unfurling in the barren landscape of her fear, a silent acknowledgment that this safety, however precarious, felt real. Meanwhile, in the cold, unyielding confines of her own home, Lorena seethed, the temporary restraining order against Elena serving not as a victory, but as a mere prelude to her ultimate retribution. Her dark red nails, polished to a malevolent gleam, tapped a rhythmic, impatient pattern against the worn kitchen table as she plotted. This new setback, this audacious challenge to her authority, had ignited a deeper, more sinister resolve within her, far beyond simple legal maneuvers. She no longer merely sought to regain Mariana's pension. She craved absolute control, an eradication of any threat to her carefully constructed world. Lorena began to make hushed phone calls, her voice a low, insidious whisper, sketching out a plan far more sophisticated and irreversible than a mere court order, involving a shadowy figure from her past who specialized in making problems and people disappear without a trace, a chilling, calculated venom. Sunny, Mariana's mustard yellow teddy bear, had found a place of honor on a small bedside table in Elena's apartment, its familiar, matted fur a comforting presence in the unfamiliar room. Elena noticed how Mariana still clung to it during restless nights, how she whispered secrets into its ear, and a profound understanding dawned upon the grandmother. Sunny was not merely a toy. It was a tangible link to Mariana's lost parents, a vessel for her untold grief and her enduring hope. Elena gently mended a small tear in Sunny's arm, her needle weaving a silent promise of repair and wholeness, and in that simple act, the teddy bear transcended its role as a mere comforter, becoming a powerful symbol of resilience, a silent guardian witnessing the quiet rebirth of Mariana's spirit, a beacon of unwavering hope in the encroaching gloom. Despite the crushing blow of the temporary restraining order, a small network of unwavering allies began to mobilize around Doña Elena, refusing to let Mariana's nascent safety be shattered. Dr. Rodriguez, his kind eyes now alight with a quiet defiance, began meticulously reviewing every one of Mariana's past medical records, searching for discrepancies, for any overlooked detail that could expose Lorena's neglect. Maria, the corner store owner, her initial fear now replaced by a fierce loyalty, bravely agreed to provide a more detailed, sworn testimony of Lorena's cruelty, her voice shaky but firm. Even a sympathetic local police officer, Officer Ramos, whose own children were Mariana's age, began discreetly investigating Lorena's past, sensing a deeper rot beneath the surface, transforming their individual acts of kindness into a formidable, collective shield against the encroaching darkness, a promise of collective justice. Just as a fragile sense of routine began to settle over Mariana and Doña Elena's days, a chilling, almost imperceptible shift occurred in the periphery of their lives. Late one evening, a sleek, dark sedan, an anomaly in the modest neighborhood, slowly cruised past Elena's apartment building, its windows tinted, its engine a low, predatory hum. Inside, a shadowy figure, his face obscured by the dim light, held a recent photograph of Mariana, a cold, calculating smile playing on his lips. He made a quick, decisive call on a burner phone, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "The target is confirmed. Initiate Phase 2. The phone clicked shut, and the sedan vanished into the night, leaving only the lingering scent of exhaust and the unsettling silence, a silent premonition of a new, unseen danger drawing inexorably closer, threatening to snatch Mariana away into an abyss far darker than her previous life. The ominous hum of the dark sedan, a chilling premonition of Mariana's impending abduction, had galvanized Doña Elena and her allies into a desperate race against time. The court hearing, initially scheduled for weeks later, was dramatically accelerated, now a tense, claustrophobic arena where Mariana's future hung precariously in the balance. The air in the packed courtroom was thick with anticipation, heavy with the unspoken weight of judgment, smelling faintly of old paper and nervous sweat. Lorena, poised and seemingly serene in a tailored dress, sat opposite Elena, her dark red nails resting calmly on the polished table, a stark contrast to the storm brewing beneath her composed exterior. Her eyes, however, flickered with a predatory awareness, scanning the faces in the gallery for any sign of weakness, any hint that her meticulously crafted facade might be crumbling, oblivious to the fact that her carefully laid plans for Mariana were about to face an unexpected and formidable challenge in this very room. A hushed silence fell over the bustling courtroom as a small, frail figure, barely a whisper of a child, was gently led to the witness stand. Mariana, her large, frightened eyes darting nervously around the imposing room, clutched her worn sunny teddy bear tightly against her chest, its matted fur a familiar comfort in the overwhelming environment. The stark overhead lights seemed to amplify her vulnerability, casting long, wavering shadows that danced around her like unseen tormentors. She caught sight of Doña Elena, a beacon of warmth amidst the sterile formality, and offered a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, a fragile thread of connection in the sea of unfamiliar faces. Across the room, Lorena watched, a subtle, almost imperceptible sneer playing at the corners of her lips, confident that the child's fear would render her silent, her carefully constructed narrative remaining unchallenged. The judge, a man of stern countenance, cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping over the scene, an initial skepticism still etched upon his features. The solemn atmosphere of the court shifted perceptibly as Doña Elena's lawyer, his voice resonating with quiet conviction, requested that Mariana's small, tattered diary be admitted as evidence. A ripple of murmurs spread through the gallery, quickly hushed by the judge's gavel. As the official began to read from the fragile pages, the childlike scrawl detailing nights of gnawing hunger, the biting cold, and the terrifying red claws of her stepmother, a profound silence descended. Each halting word, each simple drawing of an empty plate, or a figure cowering in shadows, painted a vivid, heart-wrenching picture of Mariana's hidden suffering. Lorena's composure, once unshakable, began to visibly crack. A muscle in her jaw twitched, and her perfectly painted nails now dug subtly into her palms, her eyes narrowing as the raw truth, stripped of all legal jargon, began to permeate the room, exposing her cruelty. Then, it was Mariana's turn to speak. Perched on the large chair, her feet dangling inches from the floor, she began hesitantly, her voice a whisper barely audible above the low hum of the air conditioning. "Sometimes my tummy hurt for many, many days," she began, her eyes fixed on Sonny. And Lorena's eyes, they turned red when I was hungry. She described the cold, the dark corners, the quiet fear that was her constant companion, her small hands gesturing vaguely to illustrate the pushes that sent her tumbling. Her innocent words, devoid of adult malice, were more devastating than any legal argument, each simple sentence a raw, unvarnished truth that chipped away at Lorena's carefully constructed lies. The air in the courtroom grew heavy with a collective sorrow, as the pure, unadulterated suffering of a child filled the space, demanding to be acknowledged, to be seen for what it truly was. As Mariana continued, her small voice unwavering in its recounting of cold nights and empty promises, Lorena's facade finally shattered. A low, guttural growl escaped her lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury that ripped through the courtroom's solemn quiet. Her face, contorted with rage, was no longer the picture of injured innocence but a mask of grotesque malevolence, her dark red nails now openly tearing at her own skin, leaving angry, crimson crescent marks on her palms. She lunged forward, a primal scream caught in her throat, a desperate, frantic movement that spoke volumes. Bailiffs moved swiftly to restrain her, their actions a stark testament to the unmasking of her true, venomous nature. The judge, his face now a mask of grim determination, watched the spectacle unfold, his initial skepticism replaced by an undeniable, chilling conviction, the truth laid bare before his very eyes. The judge, his voice now imbued with a profound gravity that silenced every whisper, leaned forward, his gaze sweeping over the now disheveled Lorena and the still trembling Mariana. Given the irrefutable evidence presented, the harrowing testimony of the child, and the shocking display witnessed in this court, he began, his words slow and deliberate. This court finds the allegations of severe neglect and emotional abuse to be overwhelmingly substantiated. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Therefore, I am ordering the immediate and permanent removal of Mariana from Lorena's custody, effective immediately, and awarding temporary guardianship to Doña Elena. Elena's breath hitched, tears blurring her vision, but before the full impact of the decision could settle, the judge raised a hand. However, concerning the long-term legal framework and the full extent of justice for Mariana, the court will reconvene tomorrow morning for a final, comprehensive ruling, pending further review of all protective measures. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of relief and renewed tension, the true future of Mariana still hanging by a fragile thread. The courtroom, once a crucible of tension and uncertainty, now held its breath, as the judge, his face etched with a profound sense of justice, delivered his final, unequivocal verdict. Considering the overwhelming evidence of severe neglect, the horrifying testimony of Mariana, and the deeply disturbing display of aggression witnessed yesterday, he began, his voice resonating with an authority that left no room for doubt. This court permanently revokes Lorena's guardianship. Full and permanent custody is hereby awarded to Doña Elena, effective immediately. A collective sigh of relief swept through the gallery, a wave of human compassion washing over the sterile room. Lorena, her face a grotesque mask of fury and disbelief, lunged forward, restrained swiftly by bailiffs, her primal scream of outrage echoing her complete downfall. Justice, long delayed, had finally arrived, a powerful, unyielding force that had shattered the carefully constructed facade of a cruel woman, revealing the monster within, and condemning her to face the full weight of her heinous actions, a profound and undeniable consequence. In the quiet sanctuary of Doña Elena's humble apartment, Mariana finally knew peace. The small, comfortable bed, adorned with a patchwork quilt, welcomed her fragile body, its softness a stark contrast to the cold, hard floors she once knew. The air, no longer heavy with dampness and fear, carried the faint, comforting scent of Elena's lavender soap and simmering chamomile tea, a balm to her bruised spirit. As the moon cast a gentle, silver glow through the window, Mariana drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep, the first truly peaceful slumber she had experienced in what felt like an eternity. Her small hand, no longer clutching Sonny with desperate need, rested softly by her side, her breathing even and calm. This was more than just sleep. It was a profound act of healing, a quiet reclamation of her innocence, a silent promise that the terrors of the past had finally receded, replaced by the profound, unwavering warmth of a safe and loving home, a shelter from the storm. Doña Elena watched over Mariana, her heart overflowing with a protective love that had overcome immense odds. She gently smoothed a stray strand of hair from Mariana's forehead, her touch a silent vow. Later that morning, as Mariana sat quietly, carefully coloring a vibrant drawing of a sun-drenched garden, Elena knelt beside her, her gaze unwavering. "My little one," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "listen to me carefully. No one, absolutely no one, will ever take you from here again. This is your home now, your safe place, and I am here, always." Mariana looked up. Her large eyes, once filled only with fear, now held a glimmer of understanding, a fragile, nascent trust blooming in their depths. The words were a powerful anchor, securing Mariana to a reality where safety was not a fleeting dream, but a tangible, unwavering promise, a bedrock for her new life, a foundation of unconditional love. The worn mustard-yellow teddy bear, Sunny, once Mariana's sole confidant and protector, now rested proudly on a small shelf above her bed, a silent sentinel watching over her peaceful sleep. He was still cherished, but his role had subtly shifted. He was no longer a shield against an indifferent world, but a beloved relic of a past bravely endured, a testament to her resilience. On the small wooden table, next to her half-finished drawing of a vibrant butterfly soaring free, lay a tiny, ornate key, newly polished. Elena had given it to her that morning, a symbol not just of the apartment door, but of ownership, of belonging, of a future unlocked. Mariana picked it up, feeling its cool weight in her palm, a tangible representation of her newfound freedom and security, a powerful emblem of her transformation from a cowering child to a burgeoning spirit, ready to embrace life. As days turned into weeks, a gentle rhythm of life began to settle over Mariana and Doña Elena. Laughter, a sound once foreign to Mariana, now occasionally bubbled up, light and unburdened. Yet, the deep scars of her past, though fading, were not entirely erased. A sudden loud noise could still make her flinch, and the memory of cold hunger lingered like a distant echo. The world, even with Lorena imprisoned, was not without its shadows, but Mariana now had a formidable protector, and a future brimming with the promise of warmth and care. As Mariana steps into this new dawn, where do you find your moments of quiet hope? And from what corner of the world are you watching this story unfold? A testament to the enduring human spirit. The sun, breaking through the clouds after a long, relentless storm, cast a golden, hopeful glow upon the small apartment, illuminating Mariana's bright, new drawing, and the quiet strength in Elena's eyes. In this humble corner of a forgotten neighborhood, where shadows once reigned supreme, the profound power of unwavering love had not only defied a calculated cruelty, but had meticulously rebuilt a shattered life, proving that even the smallest flame of hope, nurtured with compassion and fierce determination, can ignite an unquenchable fire of justice, transforming a child's silent suffering into a resounding anthem of triumph, a testament to the enduring human spirit.